impasse on human services in Kane County. I honestly wish we could stop meeting like this, but as long as the state and national government would neglect the safety net, this is essential. We truly appreciate the space provided by Lynn Bosley, President and CEO of United Way Elgin, sitting in front, and to Lucy Tabor, from Grand Victoria Foundation, which supports the Human Services Council. The league did reach out to state legislators representing the county, but they're supposed to be in a special session today in Springfield to address the budget crisis. That's what I was told by their offices. The budget impasse between the governor and the General Assembly continues to harm Illinois citizens. Social services have been cut by $2 billion because funds have not been appropriated for them. Medical providers have not been paid for their services. Bond rating agencies continue to lower their ratings of the state's ability to pay its debts, which increases the interest payments that the state must make on its debt obligations. It's essential that our local human service agencies share their stories about how the budget impasse is affecting them and how any change to the Affordable Care Act will affect them. So let's get started, because we do have a full agenda. First, we're going to hear about the impact on children and adults with developmental disabilities. Lynn O'Shea, the President of Association for Individual Development.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you for the league for sponsoring this event. AID was organized in 1961 by parents of children with disabilities who had no alternative or help for care for their sons and daughters. AID's mission is to empower people with intellectual, physical, and mental health challenges to enjoy lives of dignity and respect. We do that through delivery of a variety of employment, housing, crisis intervention, and psychiatric services. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget impact, the impact, what effect it's had on AID, and equally important, the state federal Medicaid program that is under jeopardy right now as a result of changes in the American Healthcare Affordability Act. AID is currently owed $1.4 million by the state of Illinois in Medicaid payments and state grant payments. AID was cut $1 million 2 years ago in our mental health programs, and that was never restored. So the financial impact is pretty significant on AID with respect to the budget. But even more importantly is the Medicaid program, which really has been stagnant for almost 20 years. 20 years ago, rates for intermediate care facilities were frozen. That means no increases per person. 15 years ago, state mental health rates for services were frozen. And almost 10 years now, the states has frozen the payment for home and community-based services for persons with developmental disabilities. That means the amount of money we get per person is the same today as it was almost 10 years ago. How do you think we survive that? We don't easily. We have made many, many sacrifices trying to balance the budget. The Medicaid rate for our direct service staff is $9.35 again this year. That's what the state will support. We have to fundraise over $2 million a year to help bridge that gap and many others because of the state Medicaid shortfall. What does that mean? Well, that means that our staff turnover rates are nearly 30% a year. It's never been so high. Every 4 to 5 months, we're replacing staff. We can't keep them at that rate. We have a vacancy rate of about 10%. People won't even apply for the jobs. That's how low these Medicaid rates have been for a decade. What have we done to try and combat that and raise our payments to our staff? Well, of course, fundraising, that's essential. We will be eliminating 11 positions this year, trying to balance the budget and keep minimal increases for at least the most direly needed position, staff. 40 fewer people got jobs last year through AID as a result of these cuts. We have a $5,000 per capita shortfall and our most expensive program for 90 individuals that have severe and profound disabilities. That's $450,000 a year we have to fundraise to break even, to continue to serve those 90 people. That's really threatens the program's financial stability going forward. AID has closed 4 programs in the last 10 years. One was early intervention. A second, our audiology services, school transition services, and our training program, maintenance training program for people with disabilities. We did our best to try to refer these folks to other resources so that they could continue, but many of them just fell off the map. We have almost 1,000 people on the wait list here in Kane and Kendall County for developmental disability services funded through the state Medicaid program. How long is that wait? Right now it's 38 years. 38 years. Most of the people will be dead before their name is pulled in the state lottery. The average wait time of 38 years is predicated on the 19,000 people that have signed up statewide, and the governor, who has budgeted only 500 people a year to move off that state wait list. 19,000 divided by 500, that's 38 years. And yes, we have many, many families who've been on the wait list a long time. On top of that, there's 16,000 kids in special ed. 8,000 will be coming out needing services in the next decade. No relief. On top of that, the Federal Affordability Health Care Act is being repealed, and right now the U.S. Senate has proposed Better Care Reconciliation Act of 2017, which will decimate the Medicaid program. Where will those 5,400 people that already serves each year go when there is no Medicaid to support them? 75% of AID's budget is Medicaid. Without Medicaid, we have no services, and we have many, many people waiting for them. We probably will be going back to the days when the state hospitals, the state schools cared for our people with developmental disabilities. This year, that cost to the state is $230,000 per capita. $230,000 to serve one person in the state institution, as compared to what the governor budgeted for home community-based services of $23,000, 1/10 the cost. It's a good investment to fund Medicaid services for people with developmental disabilities. AID spends 93% of every dollar we get on direct services, only 7% on administration. We raise over $2 million annually to fund the gap between what the state and federal government will pay and what our services cost. And we deflect thousands of people to more costly services, hospitals and nursing homes each year, and assist dozens to secure jobs. We urge our state elected officials and our governor to find solutions to these problems. We have to depend on you for solutions. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Jim Gold, AID board member, and he'll be presenting the parent perspective.
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Gould. I have a son, age 24, who is developmentally disabled. David has been at the Elgin Day program at AID for 2 years and living in an AID group home for about 9 months. We were one of the lucky families who won the lottery, and his name was pulled from that wait list that Lynn was talking about. Let me tell you a little bit about David. David suffered a pre-birth brain injury that affects his functioning in all areas. He cannot read, write, or understand the nature and consequences of significant choices. David is nonverbal. He has limited use of sign language and uses an iPad to communicate. And yet his communication is always difficult to understand, even for me, who's known him for years and years. He requires 24-hour supervision, and David needs assistance with every aspect of daily life. But David is also an active young man. He participates in Special Olympic sports, volunteers at a food pantry, loves riding his bike, and attending summer air shows. Let me now tell you a little bit about how government-funded services have helped our family. David's mother and I are divorced and live apart, although we share guardianship and parenting responsibilities. Both of us work full-time jobs, and so we are not able to personally care for David throughout the work week, nor can we pay out of pocket for David's care. That would require tens of thousands of dollars a year, simply impossible. State funding has been what makes life possible for David and for us as his parents. Without government funding through AID, David would be sitting at home all day, like thousands of people already do in Kane County. Lynn described that problem. Or either his mother or I would have to quit our jobs and stay home to care for David and thereby be unable to support ourselves. So we are very grateful for the state funding that David has received. But let me tell you what is missing in David's day program. So David can't be left alone for any length of time, and that's why he attends the day program at AID here in Elgin. He loves his friends there, but the activity level is less than we desire for David. Once a week, he goes to a recreation center. But apart from that, much of his time is spent sitting around not doing anything productive. With support, David could be active in the community. He and I volunteer one night a week at our local food pantry. It's the highlight of David's week. He loves it. At David's day program, the staff-to-client ratio for David's group is about 1 to 17. To take a group of clients into the community for volunteering would require a staff-client ratio of about 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, and that's simply not possible on the level of funding that is provided to AID. There are also some serious deficits in David's group home experience. Given David's communication difficulties and his occasional acting out behaviors, a staff member has to know David really well. Remember, he's nonverbal. Yet there has been a constant turnover of both regular as well as substitute staff at his group home. The direct service professionals that Lynn talked about a moment ago burn out because of the intense responsibilities. DSP wages, as Lynn mentioned, have not been raised in Illinois in over 9 years. So let me ask you this. Would you leave one babysitter in charge of 4 4-year-olds? A babysitter who is responsible to provide direct supervision for all 4, to shop for groceries, cook supper, clean up, assist with bathing and medications. That's an impossible job for one person to do. There's only one staff member, often female, caring for 4 intense young men at David's group home. All of them have behavior issues, all of them have communication difficulties. What David's group home needs, ideally, is 2 male staff members at all times, just to ensure basic care. Let me give you an example. David cannot shave or brush his teeth well without direct supervision. But one staff member alone can't provide that. I was there one evening, and a staff member was working with David, and another resident in the home came in. He had taken a Q-tip, shoved it into his ear, and snapped it off. And suddenly here's this crisis that the DSP has to work with. The other impact is that one staff member in the home really limits community integration. Think about this. All 4 guys have to want to do the same event, go bowling or go to a movie. And if even one doesn't want to go, none can go, because there's no additional staff member to stay home with that individual. So even though David is in residence, his mother and I are almost a daily presence in his life, taking him to appointments and activities, sports practice, speech therapy, volunteer events. Without our involvement as parents, David would have very limited community integration. Look, we're not asking for luxury care for David, but the care he gets now is barely adequate. Let me state really clearly, this is not the fault of the staff or caregivers. They are fabulous in their care for David. It's entirely about the low reimbursement rates from the state, which make their job almost impossible. There is a lot of information available on the They Deserve More website, and I would encourage you to look at that. Thank you for listening to my story about the way in which limited funding affects David and the hundreds of other people with developmental disabilities in Kane County.
The third speaker about the impact on developmental disabilities is Gil Fonger, president of Marklund.
Thank you. You know, not only am I the president and CEO of Marklund, but I also have a daughter with developmental disabilities who lives at home. So I live every day with the issue that basically the state has right now, is that the fear that every parent has is what's going to happen to my child when I'm gone. I mean, is they going to have a budget crisis? Is she not going to have the programs that she currently has? So I live with that as a parent, and of course, professionally, I live with that at Marklund. Our mission is to make everyday life possible for individuals with profound disabilities. And our vision is a happy, safe, purposeful life for every individual with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You know, I'll have to say that, you know, AID and all the providers, probably everyone around this table, we're geniuses. We operate on such a thin margin. The for-profit should come and learn from us. At Marklund, we operate on less than a 2% cash margin, and that's with raising $3 million a year. There's a $17,000 gap for every individual that we serve each year that we have to fund. And like Lynn said, that reimbursement rate goes back to 1996. I've heard that there have been some price increases since then, but I don't know. This might be just a rumor. But we have to keep making do. I mean, just like what Jim said, I mean, it's not AID's fault to have those kind of thin margins as far as to be able to have the people necessary to take care of his son, or the program that my daughter's in. I mean, it is a struggle every day to bring our services. And what the state may or may not realize, whether they care or not, but there are 740 facilities throughout the state of Illinois of long-term care. 740 long-term care facilities, for-profit and not-for-profit. And they have almost 84,000 employees serving 200,000 Illinoisans every year. It's a massive system. And with the current cut, or the proposed cut for Medicaid services, the House voted an $800 billion cut, the Trump administration, another almost $700 billion, as a $1.5 trillion cut in Medicaid over the next 10 years. You know, we operate on such a service level that we can't afford a cut. I mean, operate on the thin margins that we have today, to think about a cut, and to think about the state block grants could, you know, potentially coming to Illinois, more money that gets to be kind of passed around to political, really motivated operatives. It just seems incredible to think that that could even go on. But we have, I mean, 80-90 cents on every dollar goes directly to client care. I mean, we are an efficient operation. And as we were talking about, Lynn and Jim were both talking about the whole issue that we have around turnover. I mean, it's not like we're competing with each other for staff. We're competing with Target, Chipotle, McDonald's. We're competing with the rest of the world. And the way politicians pontificate about the $15 an hour living wage, but we can't get $1 an hour increase to DSPs, is just such hypocrisy. Maybe we shouldn't use words like that, but it's true. Somehow the state's got to come around with this. I'm gonna come up with my 4 minutes here really quick, but I've got more information that'll be in the back. But you know, the slowing down the payment cycle, so we're having to fund more and more of the gap. We've got, I think the state right now owes us about $4 million in AR 90 days plus. And so that's all being done on the backs of not-for-profits. All of the not-for-profits around this table are basically funding the, whatever, $15 billion backlog, right? In state bills on the backs of the very people we're trying to serve. And so we appreciate that you're here, your interest, whoever's listening to us online, and we appreciate, and this problem's only gonna get more difficult as we go along. But these are geniuses around this table that are continuing to make this system work.
I'd like to second that comment. Next, to discuss the impact on individuals with serious mental illness, Karen Byard, CEO of Ecker Center for Mental Health.
Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to also thank the people who came before me for describing some major problems that all of us in the health and human service industry face. Grant payments that have been frozen, low wages, huge turnover, dedicated staff who work because they care, and sacrificing things at home to take care of people with developmental disabilities, and in our case, with serious mental illnesses. I'd like to take you through a little history. In the last 10 years, the state has asked more and more of its community mental health centers, while at the same time paying less and less. In the last 10 years, multiple beds at the state psychiatric hospitals have been eliminated. So the Ecker Center and other community mental health centers are forced to care for people in the community who really need inpatient care. When the Medicaid managed care system was initiated by the state, community mental health centers in this area went from billing the state for their Medicaid to billing 12 different companies, mostly insurance companies, all of which had different billing standards, had different eligibility requirements for services. So of course, we had to add a great deal of information technology and hire many more billing staff. Of course, the state didn't help us with any extra money to move to that level. So when the first lack of grant payments due to no budget occurred, community mental health centers were already extremely financially strapped. As you know, the state didn't pay on our contracted grants for a year. And as a side, those grants are a result of signed contracts between providers and the state of Illinois. The state doesn't take its contracting with human services providers very seriously because obviously they don't live up to their contracts. At the same time, and almost as serious, is the fact that the state eliminated all grants for psychiatry services and for people who did not have Medicaid. That elimination of the psychiatry grant has been absolutely, positively devastating because it paid for half the cost of providers providing that service. It is a medical service. It is a service that is needed by people with severe mental illness. And so, community mental health centers lose great deals of money every time they provide that service now. And all of us are struggling with things like waiting lists. We certainly never had a waiting list for psychiatry services before the first cutbacks because there was no budget. And now we have 114 people waiting for a medical service that they need because of a brain disease. As a result of not being paid because of the budget crisis, Ecker Centers laid off 17 staff, including a full-time psychiatrist. We have totally slashed, almost eliminated staff benefits, closed a program, and sold a building. We did have a stopgap budget that eventually paid us almost all that was owed us for FY 2016 and half of this year. But we are going to be back in the same crisis if there is not a budget again. The other issue that is looming on the horizon that has been spoken about is the Better Healthcare Act. The state of Illinois drove people into expanded Medicaid because the federal government paid 100% for expanded Medicaid. We have 40% of our clients on expanded Medicaid. That is one of the major cuts that's going to happen if that bill is passed. And I don't think the state has the ability to match the $3 billion in payments it received for just the extended Medicaid last year. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker on the impact on individuals with serious mental illness is Mariana Osorio, Vice President of Centers Family Focus.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the press for being here, and thanks for everyone else who sponsored today's press conference. And thank you to all of my fellow geniuses for being here. My name is Mariana Osorio, and I am the Vice President of Centers with Family Focus. Family Focus has 3 centers in the city of Chicago, serving over 11 Chicago community areas and 6 suburban sites. These sites serve over 20 suburbs and cover 5 counties. Family Focus was founded in 1976 by Bernice Weisbord, a leading scholar and educator in child development. The agency was created out of the simple but powerful idea that happy, healthy children are raised by competent, confident parents. We also believe that all families need supports and that our work as a family resource and support center provide critical supports to families in need and families learning how to navigate state resources. Our services include early childhood through home visitation programs and center-based activities. We do work in youth development through community schools and after-school programming, and family support through our Family Advocacy Center and Illinois Welcoming Center. This is where I want to talk a little bit about the importance of mental health services and the impact. We are a community-based organization and a family support center. One of the things that we do incredibly well is connect families to supports and resources in the community. We do that through our Welcoming Center, we do that through our family support services, through our Family Advocacy Center. We as an organization traditionally have been seen as a place where someone can walk in and get some help from us. We were recently awarded a budget to be able to connect families in the community, bilingual families into the community with mental health services. This is incredibly important, in particular because on the first week that we received this award, we had a family come in, a mom and her mother, so a grandparent and a mother. And the grandparent was dealing with a son who was living at home with schizophrenia, and the mom had currently been dealing with some depression. So we are not a mental health organization, but what we do really well, like I said, is connect people to these resources. So through our partnerships with organizations around this table, we were able to connect both of these families to services within the mental health field. Oftentimes in our community, those families are reticent to engage in services, so we do a couple things for that. We do co-location, so we offer services within our center for mental health providers. We also co-locate in other organizations so that we can have our bilingual, bicultural staff engage families, reduce the stigmas around mental health services, and connect them quickly to mental health services. Now that more recently has been a challenge. We have over 16 partners that provide mental health services to our families. More recently, I would say in the last 3 months of service, we have not been able to connect families to services, and that's because there have not been any openings for mental health services that serve Spanish-speaking families. So this is incredibly important to recognize that, because our families, we're working to try to get them to understand the importance of mental health services and convincing them to engage in mental health services and then not have those services available is incredibly challenging. So I implore whoever is listening to recognize the importance of critical organizations like Family Focus that reach out in our centers and communities to be able to engage and network with other organizations. I want to talk really briefly about how this is currently impacting us at the overall level. As I mentioned, we serve several communities over 5 counties. As a result of the state current cash flow issue, as well as the looming problem with the state budget, the state of Illinois currently owes Family Focus $2.7 million. That was last week, so this morning I'm not quite sure. That may have increased already, I'm sure it has. We've exhausted our full line of credit. We've exhausted all of our reserves. We've had board members give us additional money beyond their traditional donations to us to be able to subsidize, frankly, the state of Illinois. As of July 1st, there's going to be a temporary 71% reduction in Family Focus staff. 71%. That equals people's lives, their children, families, community members that are not going to be able to get services. Those families with 0 to 3, fathers that need parenting classes, delays in connecting families with that much needed mental health services, English classes are gonna be delayed, immigrant families that won't be able to apply for citizenship. That's 5 counties over 20 municipalities that the state, and we're only gonna be able to resume this once the state begins to pay their bills and have a state budget. So we implore whoever is listening and all of us here to continue to take action. And again, I thank the hosts of this event today to let us continue to talk about this, or else many families, hundreds and thousands, over 17,000 families we were able to serve last year. If we're gonna reduce on July 1st, 71% of our staff, imagine all those families that are not gonna get services. Thank you.
Now to discuss the impact on victims of domestic violence, Michelle Meyer, Executive Director of Mutual Ground.
Hi, thank you, Jean. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and United Way for hosting us today, and for all the press who are here. And then also thank you to all my colleagues for doing the work that you do, obviously very needed. I feel very fortunate to be able to represent Mutual Ground, which is a domestic violence and sexual assault services agency in Aurora, Illinois. We serve the southern portion of Kane County and all of Kendall County, and we've been doing that since 1975. At Mutual Ground, we focus on prevention, intervention, and ongoing services. So in our prevention programs, we're in over 100 schools right now, providing prevention education to kids as little as preschool all the way up to high school. We're also going everywhere we can to spread awareness about domestic violence and sexual assault issues. In our intervention program, we have a shelter that runs 24/7, and it has 28 beds and 7 cribs, all of which are filled right now. We have 2 crisis lines that we also provide 24/7, and we have an emergency response program that responds to 4 different area emergency rooms when victims present there. And we also have a court advocacy program that goes into the 3 area courthouses and provides help with orders of protection, navigating the criminal justice system, and basically just making your way through the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. And then we have our ongoing services, which are counseling services. We have master's level counselors that do counseling with both domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims on a more long-term basis, because you're never just gonna come in for a counseling session and be fine after a traumatic incident like domestic violence or sexual assault has occurred to you. Just to give you an idea on how the budget has impacted Mutual Ground, we signed a contract with the state of Illinois for domestic violence services to the tune of $489,000, and we've only received $116,000 of that, which is basically federal pass-through money. In our sexual assault program, we signed a contract for $194,000, and we've only seen $56,000 of that. The other day, a private foundation was in who we were trying to get some funding from, and during the site visit, he said to me, "How do you run this organization on $2 million?" Because that's our budget, $2 million. And I had to laugh, because I don't even know sometimes. We're on such a strict, thin shoestring budget that it just amazes me sometimes. And when you say geniuses, I kind of agree with you, because it made me even like think, wow. So to think about it in terms of having a $2 million budget, providing all the services we provide, and being $500,000 short by the end of this month from the state. What that means is we've had to make some very difficult decisions at Mutual Ground. In November, I had to let go of 4 people. And 4 people, the staff of under 50 is a lot. And so to give you an idea, we've actually, since the beginning of FY17, have cut our staff 33%. And what that's caused is waiting lists. We've had a waiting list since December, and it's been full. We actually had to turn away for counseling services 54 adults and 12 children since January. So far, just in the month of June, we've turned away 7 adults and 8 children requesting shelter due to a lack of bed space. And I tell you that because the need is there, and we don't even have enough beds for the need. So we've also had to deny shelter to 22 adults and with 55 children in our shelter. In our counseling programs, we've seen from FY16 to FY17, our counseling go down 12% with our staff cuts. And our hours of services provided has gone down 28%. We are doing everything we can as an organization to fundraise, and we are fundraising, and we are looking for non-governmental funding. But a $600,000 gap in funding is really hard to fill with fundraising, especially on a year-to-year basis. I understand that some difficult decisions are gonna have to be made at the state level, and I just expect them to be made. This uncertainty has been so hard for us. I'm literally giving my board members a revised budget basically on a 2-month basis to try to figure out what we're gonna do. So it's dire. The fact is, we're serving crime victims, and in my opinion, the state has ignored these crime victims and the needs that they have. It's not their fault that they're crime victims. And the service we provide at Mutual Ground and Community Crisis Center is free. Because if you're a victim of crime, you shouldn't have to pay for services. And that's our philosophy. We want to keep that philosophy. But the way things are going, it's going to be really hard to keep going with free services if we can't get the help that we need for our most vulnerable citizens from the state of Illinois. And to top that off, you know, we have been fiscally responsible to a T. We have raised money for reserves over the years because we frankly kind of figured something like this would happen, because I've been going to the state capitol every year requesting an increase of funding or don't cut our funding. But the reserve money that we got, that's our money that our donors have given to us to expand services and to make sure that the clients that we're serving are getting the best service possible, not to subsidize the state funding. So if you can sense frustration in my voice, it's there. I'm extremely frustrated, and I'm ready for an end to this all. So I implore the legislators to get this fixed and take care of the people that you're responsible for in the state of Illinois. Thank you.
Also talking about the impact on victims of domestic violence is Gretchen Vapner, Executive Director, Community Crisis Center.
Well, thanks to everyone, and to most of what Michelle said, ditto. We're sister programs for almost every reason that she mentioned, and we're experiencing many of the same things. Although it's tempting, blame is not the reason we're here today. We didn't get to year 3 without a lack of diligence on all sides. We did not get to another deadline without at times various leaders refusing to come to the table. In the last year, domestic violence services have remained in place for the most part. We now hear that 3 or 4 shelters throughout the state could be closing or have closed. However, while folks in Springfield wrangled, we worked. 8,760 hours in a year, all of them unpaid. Last night, we had 38 people in shelter, 23 adults and 16 children, victims of domestic violence, survivors of sexual assault, and 2 families which were homeless for other reasons. The children ranged in age from 3 weeks to 15 years. The moms and other adults ranged from 18 to 67. 3 different languages, diverse levels of mental and physical health, a wide range of education and life experience. However, they all have in common what they need: information, resources, support, and the big one, hope. In addition to residents, on Friday, we had 42 people through our lobby, 11 with appointments to see legal advocates and domestic violence and sexual assault counselors, 3 of them children, others seeking food from the emergency food pantry, diapers for their children, toiletries, picking up their mail, and so forth. Where would you have them go? I asked the state. When our doors are finally closed, the hotline finally silent, trained staff, volunteers, and interns having moved on, it must be that these people in need will just simply disappear. Or at the very least, their needs will magically vanish. Domestic violence is a matter of life and death. Our services are more like the emergency room at the hospital than an appointment at a doctor's office. Our basic service is availability, what I like to call the fire department model. If you only pay the fire department when they appear to put out a fire at your neighbor's house, when you have the fire at your house, they will not be available. And the state of Illinois has paid us for none of it, not being available and not for responding in accordance with every detail of our signed contract. And almost daily we are asked to update reports, revise current and proposed budgets, narratives, and so forth to support the issue of transparency. My question again is, how much transparency in a zero? We are fulfilling both sides of our contract, providing and documenting service and paying ourselves to do it. For domestic violence alone, the state will soon owe us $500,000. The funds we are using were given to us and meant to support the maintenance and growth of our services and facility far into the future, as Michelle has suggested. Those funds have been hard fought and hard won, and they belong to the center. They do not belong to the state of Illinois. Just like in your family's budget, when you start living off your savings, you soon will not have a savings account. What are we to do? Our family has proven a dedication to the safety of women and children in Illinois and to batterers who are trying to change their violent behavior for over 42 years. We do not give up easily, planning another fundraiser, encouraging more donations, forming another partnership. I thought, having been there at the very beginning, that the state of Illinois termed domestic violence services as essential to the peace and safety of our homes. Indeed, the state has supported services for nearly 40 years, one of the first states to do so. What happened? We have at least been ignored. We know hard choices, again, as Michelle mentioned, need to be made. There is simply not enough money. As a group, Human Services are accustomed to making those kind of decisions, those choices on a daily basis. Do you ever wonder why education and Human Services are the last to be paid? Well, I don't wonder anymore. Could it have something to do with the fact that we're good at raising our own money? That we're good at making up some of those deficits? Or that we're considered a not-for-profit? And the fact that not-for-profits are not considered business by many of our legislators. Well, in a service economy, service is definitely a business, and one we know a lot about. But we often are looked on as not having a product. Service is our product, a product with a profit, a benefit seen and felt in the quality of life for all of those living in the community we share. I am truly inspired by everyone telling their story today, and I also am increasingly disheartened by the state of our world. I have always believed in an opportunity to tell truth to power. Words and stories have the power to change minds. I still must believe that. But we've been talking for a long time to anyone who would listen, speaking on behalf of the people we serve, who often don't literally have a voice. I sure hope it works. Thank you for today.
Now the impact on English language learners, Karen Oswald, the Executive Director of Literacy Connection.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to share our story. I'm Karen Oswald, I'm the Executive Director of Literacy Connection. The agency was founded in 1984 and has been funded by the Secretary of State Literacy Office, which is part of the Illinois State Library, since that grant program was established in 1986, every year except last year. We've also been funded for the family literacy program since 2001. The state literacy office does not offer any grants unless the state budget is approved. And those grant awards have not increased by just barely anything at all since 1986. Our purpose is to serve adult learners who have barriers to attending traditional classroom programs like those at community college. We provide volunteer literacy instruction to an adult population that has low basic literacy skills or very limited English proficiency. We serve typically 300 adults each year, and we're the parents of 458 school-aged children. And they have nowhere else to go for instruction without our program. Our family literacy program provides instruction for adults and their children at at-risk elementary schools. All of these adults need to improve their skills to navigate the community: schools, healthcare, employment, and human services. In fact, many of our clients are also clients of the other agencies at this table. Last year, in FY16, we received no funding for our volunteer literacy program and only a small amount for family literacy. This year, the stopgap budget allowed us some funds to be released, and we were funded for the volunteer literacy program. But our funding is half the amount that we received in FY15, when we had $137,000 in grants from the state. Our staff took 30% salary cuts last year, and we're still under a 10% pay cut. Salaries are $61,000 less than they were 2 years ago, and that's for a very small staff. We eliminated a 30-hour-a-week position and several part-time positions in our family literacy programs. Our volunteer literacy program is serving 49 fewer adults than we did 2 years ago, and the eliminated family literacy program is not serving the 75 adults and their children who are only able to access instruction through their children's school. In addition, due to reduced staff, we're only recruiting half as many volunteers as we did in FY15 when we were fully funded. These years of low tutor recruitment will continue to impact the program, as the average tutor stays in the program over 3 years, and many for much, much longer. Statistically, a typical adult learner in our program is a 43-year-old married Hispanic mother of 2 from Mexico who has about 9 years of education. Usually the family income is less than $30,000 a year, and they meet with a tutor one-on-one to learn English about 35 hours of instruction per year. A typical learner can read and write short sentences or phrases in English and complete personal information on simple forms, can ask and answer simple questions and follow basic instructions. But I'll tell you about Rocio, who is a current learner in the program and a soon-to-be divorced mother of 2 who lives in Carpentersville. She's been a domestic violence victim, and her husband abandoned the family in the last 2 months. After failing to pay the mortgage, she's looking for a new place to live. She works full-time at minimum wage, but does not make enough money to meet the minimum income requirements for a low-income apartment in Carpentersville. She needs to improve her English so she can get a better job to support her children. She's been in our program for 5 years, beginning in the family literacy program and now working with an individual tutor. Her English is improved, but she struggles to complete the applications and navigate the systems that she needs to now to find housing, other support, and establish her new independent life. Our waiting list has 98 people who are expected to wait a year or more before we can serve them. Waiting learners can attend drop-in conversation groups, but these are often filled to capacity. These adults are waiting to improve their reading and English skills. They need English to help their children with their homework now. Read bedtime stories to their children now. To speak English at work now. Become naturalized citizens now. And access health care and human services now. For these adults who are waiting to learn English to improve their lives, we need an Illinois state budget now. Thank you for coordinating this event and listening.
To discuss the impact on children and adults with substance use disorders, Perry Meyer, Executive Director, Open Door Clinic.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Perry. I am the Executive Director of Open Door. Open Door has been around for about 40 years now, and that we started as a sexually transmitted disease clinic, and from that course of time, based on the needs of our clients/patients, we've had to expand. Open Door now feels the direct impact of the lack of state budget. New data from the Illinois Department of Public Health shows 250 fewer people with HIV identified during the budget impasse. 250 people are running around who have HIV who don't know that they're infected. Why am I talking and why am I in the group of substance abuse? Substance abuse, alcohol and other drugs can affect a person's judgment and increase risk of getting or transmitting HIV. Some populations are at disproportionate, I can't never say that word, I don't know why I wrote it down. Disproportionately at risk for substance abuse and HIV. Social and structural factors make it difficult to prevent HIV among people who use substances. So our goal is that if you have HIV, we will provide substance abuse services for individuals so that they can be on their road to recovery. If they don't have HIV, we allow them the knowledge of what their HIV status is, and from there, inject them into the system. A person who has HIV, it costs the system about $350,000 for their care. So one of the things that we do is go out and provide testing and education services to those at greatest risk. Due to the lack of state budget, Open Door has had to scale back our efforts to test the substance abuse population. However, they keep increasing our scopes. So they tell us, we're sorry, we have no money for you, but you will now need to go out and test more people and engage them into care. Discrimination and stigma for those who have a substance abuse problems may delay care, or in this instance, the lack of services and the lack of other organizations that can provide care are impacting that system. There is nothing worse than having someone tell you their story. We talk about having them undress for you, tell us their story, and then we have to tell them we are very sorry that we don't have space for you right now. Open Door's goal was to expand our substance abuse services to the LGBTQ community just because we believe that that need is significant, but it had to scale that back because of the lack of a budget. Referrals are provided to them, but other safety net providers are not able to take on new clients because of their own issues of lack of funding. Just recently, and we hear these stories more and more, an HIV positive individual came in, lacked insurance, told us their story, and felt like he needed treatment today. We called about 3 or 4 other programs because of the specialty or level of care that this individual needed. We couldn't take on this. We called 3 or 4 agencies, and all of them said, we're sorry, we don't have space for you. Now we have this person who's ready for treatment, who wants to go in for treatment, but has limited resources. This scenario probably plays out with a lot of my other co-people on this panel. Over the last 6 months, Open Door has seen an increase in demand for substance usage services. So they call around. They find out that Open Door does provide substance abuse services, and they give us a call, and we're sorry, and we have to tell them that we're sorry, just because of not meeting our scope of service. Karen talked a little bit about psychiatrists in the area and the lack of. Open 2 does struggle trying to secure psychiatrists that can treat those who have substance abuse problems. This is evident across the board as lack of state budget has a cascade effect on the system. Within 6 months of no budget, Open Door started seeing an increase in the requests of both mental health and substance usage services from those not impacted by HIV. It's sad to me that we continue to fight the fight. Actually, it's not sad, but we have to fight this fight because we don't have a budget, and that we continue to be required to do so. The Senate has just recently sent out its own version of a better health care plan. What we see is that those who have pre-existing conditions, whether it's be substance abuse, mental health, HIV, or any other chronic diseases, that they will not get the care that they need. There will be less ability to address issues not related, in my case, of individuals who have HIV. There will be problems with medication access, lack of specialty care referrals, and what's evident as we're all here today is lack of senior housing services, homeless, domestic violence, mental health, and substance abuse. I think that this will continue if we don't educate our legislators to come up with a good budget that is helpful for all of us. Thank you.
To discuss the impact on the homeless in the community, Neil McMenamin, Associate Director of Hesed House.
Again, I want to thank you guys for pulling this together, letting us kind of talk about what's going on. Neil McMenamin, Associate Director and Division Director of Programs at Hesed House in Aurora. We serve the mid to southern Kane and all Kendall County area. We, as far as scope, we'll work with about 1,100 unique individuals just in our overnight emergency shelter over the course of a year. Including the other programs that we have, it's about 1,500 unique individuals that we'll work with throughout the year. We have an overnight emergency shelter. We also have a daytime drop-in center for those that stay at the shelter. The idea of the drop-in center is for those who are there at night and can come somewhere that's safe during the day, and we can try to build relationships and connect them to services. We also have a transitional living community, which is heavy family. It runs about 18 families, about 55 total individuals. We also have a homeless prevention program, working with people that are in the community and are struggling and are looking at a crisis that came up, and now they're behind on rent, they're behind on utilities, and they're facing a 5-day eviction notice. One of the ways to help end homelessness, especially for us, and to lower the numbers, is to help prevent people and families from dropping into a homeless situation. We also have a permanent supportive housing program for the chronically homeless, long-term chronically homeless with disabling conditions. And kind of going into where we're at with state funding. Before this last 3 years, it was about 3 years in a row when, we don't know why, but we had faced a 52% proposed cut in our overnight emergency shelter state funds. So during those years, we kept mobilizing our network of volunteers and supporters and going to Springfield, and we were able each of those 3 years to stave off those cuts. So we're like, ooh, hey, at least we staved them off. And then we go into these last 3 years. So our program for some of the most vulnerable people in the community, it's called Lighthouse Permanent Supportive Housing. And we're looking at people that have been homeless sometimes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. In and out of the emergency room, in and out of behavioral health at Mercy, in and out of county jail, the Aurora Police Department, a lot of ambulance trips, in and out of the shelter, living under bridges. And so what we're able to do is we're able to work with those individuals, build some relationship, get them into a very basic apartment, and provide intensive case management there to manage their conditions and what's going on. What we've seen is 95% retention rate in housing for those that are in the program. And it takes a lot of services, it takes a lot of work with landlords to keep that situation going, and it reduces cost to the entire system, to the emergency care system. So the program, Lighthouse, took a 50% funding cut. So we ended up having to lay off 50% of the staff. We had to discharge and couldn't service 25% of that population, which was very difficult. You have people that you've seen struggle for so long, and you've gotten housed, and you're working with intensely, and now you don't have the staff, and you can't work with them, and they go right back into a situation of homelessness. There, just one gentleman that we work with for quite a while has lived on the Indian Trail Bridge in Aurora. He eats out of the dumpster behind a restaurant that is close to there. And we've engaged him at times and got him to come to shelter. At times he'll disappear back, he'll be hospitalized. He very much struggles with mental illness and mental health issues. And any talk about psychiatry and medication, is it's poisoning me, and they're poison pills, and it keeps him living on the fringe. So when we can engage a person like that who isn't wanting to go into other services, we can help just give them a little basic dignity in their life. That's what we're trying to do, and that's where we got hit in the gut the most. Delayed payments have also hurt us. We had 1 year we didn't get any funding. It was supposed to come, and it didn't, for homeless prevention. And that's 75 to 100 households that we're able to work with to help stabilize them so they don't become homeless. So frustrations during that funding year were people that came in and they qualified for the service, and we could have helped in the past with $600 for utility assistance that's behind, and if they lose it, it violates their lease and they're evicted. We can't help them. And then they come into the shelter, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So delayed payments that are promised, they never show up. definitely affect the population. And with everybody that you've heard here, we very much rely on, and we work with almost every agency here. We very much rely on substance abuse services and domestic violence services, mental health services, and all these interconnections. So definitely for us, when we look at the idea of the proposal that the Senate has made, that the House has passed, those proposals, just the idea of the rollback of Medicaid expansion and big deep funding cuts and caps in Medicaid, they really affect everybody that's here, how they've explained. And for us, it means we can't connect people to services they need to move forward, to stabilize, which means more crisis, more chaos, more people living on the streets and living on the fringe. So just kind of finish one story. As I was reading emails over the weekend, because I don't want to, but I do, we had a mom with 3 kids. They came to the shelter 3 in the morning on Saturday morning and needed somewhere to stay. And it was domestic violence, and she was fleeing. So she was fleeing that situation. We brought her into the shelter, talked with her, and kind of explained how things were, unfortunately, but still a good story so far, is she didn't want to necessarily sleep in the women and children's room because we just have a big room with mats that wakes up at 5:45 in the morning. Kids haven't even slept yet because of the crisis that was going on. So she asked, can I sleep in the van in the parking lot with the kids? Of course, you can sleep in a van in the parking lot with the kids. She did then come in the next day during the day. We started to work with her. She's stayed these last few nights. She's made some calls to Mutual Ground, but as you can hear, there isn't available space. And if these funds, this budget doesn't come through, and these funds aren't restored, these are the roadblocks that people in need of services hit.
And finally, the impact on our seniors. Mickey Miller, the Executive Director of Senior Services Association.
Thank you for hosting this, United Way, League of Women Voters. I honestly didn't think any of you would still be here, because I'm last. And I thought, well, I won't prepare, because either they'll be gone, or their eyes will have glazed over already, listening to all the other stories. So I probably won't be as smooth as the rest of you, but I truly feel humbled to be sitting at the same table with agencies that have told the stories that they've told today. Some days when you work in a nonprofit, you feel like you're the only one out there fighting this battle. And misery loves company, so I really appreciate knowing and hearing your stories because I feel like I'm not alone anymore. This is an agency, Senior Services Associates is an agency that's been around since 1973. We serve Kane, Kendall, and McHenry counties, and last year we served over 28,000 seniors. My executive director would be really upset with me if I didn't tell you, she's been here since the beginning, and these last couple of years have been the worst she's ever seen. And that's not easy to say, because she's been here for 44 years. And when it's the worst, that's sad. And it comes at an especially bad time for us because we have more seniors than we've ever had before. The baby boomers are aging at a rate of 10,000 a day, are turning 65. And you have not seen our rates change in the last 10 years. Our staff has not had a raise in 5 years. So when your rates don't change in 10 years, and the state, as you said, is asking you to do more paperwork and justify what you do more every single day, it's very frustrating for your staff, and hence the high turnover rate that you've already heard. I can't compete with McDonald's because you know what? They can go work at McDonald's and flip those burgers, and afterwards they go home and they don't worry about things. My staff, who gets paid the same rate as McDonald's workers, goes home and worries about their clients every night. They take that job home with them. We're not supposed to do that, but mentally, we don't shut our brains off at night. And that's very hard to say to your staff, stay in here, fight this battle with us, when you could work at McDonald's for the same amount of money and go home and not worry at night. So that is a challenge for us, and Gil mentioned, that the nonprofits are really some of the best users of funds that you've ever seen. I've often said that if the legislators had to squeeze blood out of a turnip like we do, they learn a lot. If you took this table, these tables down to Springfield and let us do the budget, I can guarantee you, we'd have a budget, we'd probably have a surplus. Because we would squeeze it so hard and make it work. And it's just so frustrating to know that to them, it's just numbers. And they have their pork projects. We don't have pork, we have people. And last year, the budget, stopgap budget, was finally put in place because the construction was at risk. And last week in the newspaper, it said, now the construction is at risk again. I'll bet you we see some change this week, because that's what finally got movement last year. I'm sorry, but road work is not as important as the people that we serve. These are life and death matters. And the roads, I can still drive down a road even if it has bumps in it. But our legislators think that it's more important to get that settled when it has to do with roads than with people. And I think that's a shame. People are more important. I can tell you that we do have some legislators who understand what we do. We try to educate them all the time, but we hold something called the Kane County Legislative Forum. And it's not until your parents or yourself age that you realize how hard it is. Aging is not for the faint of heart. It is hard work to age. And if you've seen the commercials on TV from MetLife with the little diagrams that show how much you've saved for your retirement, you realize that you haven't saved enough for retirement. But the legislators always say, well, you know, your seniors should have their pensions and this and that. Most have had pensions that have been rated, or they invested their money, and when the stock market crashed, they had lost their investments. So even though many of them did save for their retirement, many of them have lost the money. So they can't just, you know, use that as an example of why, well, they didn't save well. Well, you know what? They're at an age now where they don't have an opportunity to save anything else. These are vulnerable people. And these are people with pride. These are the people who created our communities. These are the people who built the roads, built the schools, paid the taxes. And you're gonna say, we're not gonna take care of them now in their age. That's not fair. You wouldn't have communities out here if it wasn't for the seniors. So it is our responsibility to care for them when they can no longer care for themselves. At Senior Services, we've been lucky. We haven't had to lay people off. What we've done instead is when people leave, we do not fill their positions. It's the same difference, but we're not having to let people go. Over the last year, we've lost 7.5 positions, including information and assistance specialists, elder abuse investigators, care coordinators, and senior companion staff. Our elder abuse investigators, you've seen in the newspaper how DCFS has been criticized for not investigating cases quickly enough. We also have to investigate cases that come in on the hotline. And our care coordinators are supposed to be carrying an average caseload of 80. Our care coordinators cover an average caseload of 120 to 180. Now, of course, that has happened because when people have left and we haven't filled positions, staff has had to absorb those cases. So yes, our waiting lists are getting long. Some clients now have to wait 2 months before they can get in to get help from us. 30 days to get in-home service help. We have completely eliminated the senior companion program in the Elgin area. And last year, we used, as others, our endowment fund to pay the bills. We have subsidized the state of Illinois. Thank God that we had raised those $400,000 over the years, but that was supposed to help us take care of the growth of the senior population coming in. We knew this was coming, this silver tsunami. So we had prepared for it and did extra fundraising for it. And then we had used that to cover the things that the state didn't pay us for last year. The budget increase, or the budget crisis has added to an increase of caregivers calling, caregiving family members calling and saying, but I need help with my mom, I need help with my dad. I can't wait 30 days for you to come out. Why can't she have in-home service? You know, the state required us years ago to work toward home and community-based services. Nobody says that they can't wait to get to a long-term care facility. I want to age in a nursing home. I just want to tell you a little bit about nursing homes. The national average for a nursing home costs $228 a day, which is about $83,000 a year. Luckily in Illinois, our average nursing home cost is only $178 a day, which is $65,000. But our community care program, which is our community-based programs where we put in-home services in, costs an average of $800 a month, which is $9,600 a year. And now they're gonna cut that program. They wanna take it to Medicaid only, and they wanna create something called the Community Reinvestment Program, where we only spend $400 a month. I can guarantee you that those folks who don't get community-based services are gonna end up in long-term care. Now, do you wanna have the state cover $9,600 a year for somebody, or do you wanna have them cover $65,000 a year? The state is being penny wise and very foolish. And that, with the number of increased seniors, that's gonna be a huge, huge increased cost. So, I'm a caregiver myself for my brother, who's much older than I am. And my mother-in-law. And I can tell you as a caregiver who knows the system and knows what kind of services to put in, how hard it is. But when your parents and your older siblings get to that point, or your spouse gets to that point and you need help, and you don't know what to do, and you don't have the resources to do it, I've decided that I'm gonna move, and I'll probably be homeless because I won't have that reserve built up. But I'm gonna live on the front porch of the mansion, the governor's mansion. That's where I'm going. I'm gonna take my little box and live there, because that is my retirement plan. Because I don't think they understand retirement for the average person. So thank you for listening. I'm glad you're still here. And I'm glad you didn't leave, and I'm glad you're not glazed over, because our seniors are very important to us. They helped create our towns. Now we need to care for them. So legislators, the only ones who understand, have aging parents who have gone through this. The rest of you, just wait.
So thank you to all of you for sharing your painful stories about how the state is eviscerating our human services safety net. Illinois continues to have a structural deficit. Its revenue system is not raising enough money to pay for the services that it provides. The League of Women Voters does advocate for a number of ways to raise the revenue. As you've heard, services have been cut past the bare bones. So the League advocates for a number of ways to address the problems that were described today. Please see me later to find out more about these solutions. I'd like to open it up to the media and other audience members for questions and answers.
I have a question. Gretchen, you mentioned that there might be 3 shelters in danger of closing, 3 or 4. Which ones are those?
The Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence could name them. I know that one is Centralia, and I think the other one in danger was Clay City. And just recently we heard possibly Dove Incorporated of Decatur. Heard that as a possibility over the weekend. That's one of the largest and longest running shelters in the state. I don't know who. Oh, Sojourn in Springfield.
Thank you.
Many of them maybe are getting ready to close, or they have closed, or they've tried to close. You know, the interesting thing when you're running a crisis business, you may shut off the lights and people may still come to your door. So it's an interesting situation.
Karen Beyer, What are some, if no budget is in place by the end of the week, what kind of action are you gonna have to take? Are you gonna have to do more cuts, or what's the action plan?
We were paid by the stopgap bill, so we will not be doing drastic things. But what has happened since the last budget is we've been really trying to claw our way back to some semblance of how we were before. We're aggressively going after grants for psychiatry and have been able to make some small increases as a result. If we don't have a budget, that's going to stop, and eventually we will run out of money, and we will be back where we were before, cutting staff, cutting services. For the very immediate future, we will be okay.
Piggybacking on that question, is there anybody here who's really in danger of drastic measures if there's no state budget within a few days?
Well, I had shared, that we are going down 71% of our staff as of July 1st, and that's part of the FY18 potential, not having a budget, as well as cash flow and being owed so much money from the state. So that's pretty drastic.
The other thing though, in addition to the state, it's also the federal
Yeah.
effect on Medicaid, and that is equally significant and will have tremendous impacts on many of these.
For DD for people who are providing services to people with developmental disabilities, we're assuming that the court will continue to mandate the state to provide our services. But frankly, if they didn't, we'd all be on life support. Because we really couldn't survive very long at the amount of staffing that was needed to care for those that we serve.
And in addition, if the state is continuing to pay out more than it has, which is our understanding that they are paying more than they have to spend, at some point, all of us are going to be in trouble, because there will be no money available to pay those that are providing services. The ID has one program in particular we're very concerned about, 90 individuals that are the most severely and profoundly disabled. And we're providing a $5,000 a year subsidy to each of those people. That's $450,000 a year fundraised for one program. How can we continue to do that? How can we continue to do that? We are really concerned about it.
We're also currently in a planning process to identify all of our frontline staff to be able to identify which families are at the highest risk. And, I say that recognizing and hoping everyone knows that we serve high-risk families, so they're all high risk. But we need to identify which ones are the highest risk, which ones have court dates coming up, which ones are in need of services, and planning how we're going to be able to support those families, starting next week, right after the holiday. So it's very challenging. Our board a while back said, we have to have a contract in place before we do any work, in particular because of this state situation. Well, we are getting contracts from the state, but there's no money appropriated to those contracts, so it becomes incredibly difficult. And we're, our board is taking their fiduciary responsibility very, as they should, and telling us, we need to see that that contract has appropriated dollars to it, or else we are not going to work, because we have no guarantee that we're going to get paid.
To address the issue of the Medicaid, the state has been so thrilled that the federal government was paying 100% of the cost of the expanded Medicaid, that there has been a very, very concerted effort for quite some time to have people sign up for that expanded Medicaid. And a lot of us depend on that money because the state is pulling away grants, reducing what they pay us. And so if Medicaid is cut drastically, you're going to see an unprecedented disaster.
As regards to developmental disabilities, last November, the Chicago Tribune did a week-long series on some of the crises that have happened within developmental disability service providers across the state. And thank goodness, most providers are well above board. But the problems that arise around abuse and neglect are directly tied to the lack of adequate compensation to provide sufficient staffing. And so while there may not be a direct increase, the problems are chronic and ongoing. I'd encourage you to look at the Trib series and to look at the stories that are on the They Deserve More campaign website. Lots of good information there about the impact on the disability community.
That to pick up on that indeed, many people here have talked about the interconnectedness, that it's a snowball effect. When one isn't served, then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, that because of the interrelatedness of the problems. But also, when they have to cut back, this is going to increase the crime. It's going to increase the pressure on the jails. And we have a governor who said he wants to cut the number of people in jail, but these guys are preventing people from going there.
I just have to interject something that we've experienced in the last 2 months, and it's happened twice. A car pulls up, usually in these 2 instances on a Sunday afternoon, in front of the center. We're located in a big old school building, so we're hard to ignore even though there's no big sign out in front. They pull up in front of our door. They open the car door, the driver and the other person in the front seat, tell the person in the back seat to get out and to go ring the bell. They do. We let her in. She turns out to be an elderly woman who does not know why she's there, who does not have any idea that the car has just driven away. So caretakers are, for whatever reason, deciding to do that. Elderly people who may or may not be victims of abuse, in these 2 cases we believe they were. They had income which they were not aware of. And the case management needed to sift through a case takes at least 3 agencies looking at senior services. I think I was on the phone for 3 days. They were on the phone back to me for 3 days, trying to figure this out for this client, for these 2 clients. Now, I've been doing this for 42 years. I have never seen anything like this. Could it have happened before? Yes. But we are aware of 2 cases in the last 2 months. And it's shocking. But it does show not only the interrelatedness, but the situation that people can find themselves in when they've fallen through every crack. Not just one crack, but every crack. And I often am asked, well, where are these people's family? Well, these 2 people, their family was driving the car.
Yeah, I'm not with the press, even though I'm sitting on my phone, Brenda. Everybody. I'm a board member with AID, and I've been fortunate that I know most of the people on the panel, and I want to thank them for the stories, because the most frustrating part for a taxpayer is that these treatments, these services that are provided by all of these agencies save money. If you look at just the most egregious one is for DD services, somebody in a state operated developmental center, it costs the state $230,000, and we're about $23,000 if we can serve those people in a community and we can provide them services. There's much better places for people to be than prisons and homeless, and it's cheaper for the state to do it. Unfortunately, we just look at the cost rather than the value that all of these great people provide, all these great agencies, and thank God for the people that work at your agencies and do all this work. I do not know how they get up and do it every day, because they are working under incredibly tough financial conditions, and there's a certain place in heaven for all the people that work at those agencies.
Can I say something about that too? Similar to the DD community, to all of you, domestic violence and sexual assault caseworkers and counselors, they're hearing the worst of the worst stories every day too. One after another after another. It's a difficult job. I couldn't even be a domestic violence and sexual assault counselor. And not only that, so they're hearing these stories every day, and then they have to go home and they have to worry about whether they have a job or not, and whether they can put food on the table for their kids. And then I have a grant monitor who's saying, how do you do this on $2 million? The unfortunate reality is, I do this on $2 million because nobody's being paid what they should be being paid for doing this type of work. So that's like a whole nother issue on top of this, which we've all talked about, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely difficult, and something needs to be done.
So it's geniuses and heroes.
And angels.
And angels.
I'll give you angels too.
Any further questions? Yeah, can't think of any. Okay, well, hopefully I've answered them in the press packet. If not, you know where I live. So I really appreciate all the time and effort that people have put into this today. But now it's time for next steps. We need everybody's voices to advocate in Illinois for a fully funded budget at the national level to prevent the Affordable Care Act from going down the tubes. Tomorrow, Tuesday, and I have a little half sheet at the table back there with all the contact information. Okay, so tomorrow, Tuesday, call your state legislators and the governor about passing a fully funded fair budget. That's the big call-in day is tomorrow, Tuesday. Before Thursday, contact your senators and also the governor about the Affordable Care Act, because certainly Illinois has a whole lot to lose if Medicaid is destroyed. But the other thing is that I understand that, yes, the Senate is acting, they just really want to get this done before July 4th, and so Thursday is a key day. But also the House is lined up to come in right behind. So also, please contact your representatives, whether Halpern, Roscom, the fellow, I can't pronounce his name. Yeah. That all the contact information is on the half sheet in the back. Please do advocate, make our voices heard. Thank you all for coming today. I applaud all of you, heroes and geniuses.
Thank you.